In today's world, numbers are often seen as a measure of success. We look at how many followers someone has, how many people attend an event, how many views a video gets, or how many votes a candidate receives. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the more people who support something, the more likely it is to be right or true. But truth doesn't work like that. Truth is not validated by the majority. Just because something is popular doesn't mean it's right, and just because something is in the minority doesn't mean it's wrong. This principle is deeply rooted in the teachings of Islam. The Quran itself reminds us in many verses that most people will not believe, no matter how clear the signs are. Allah says in Surah Yusuf, "And most of mankind will not believe, even if you desire it eagerly." 12:103. This tells us that truth can exist even when few accept it. It can stand firm even when the world turns away. Truth is not dependent on how many people follow it, it's dependent on its source. If the source is divine, if it comes from Allah, then it is the truth, whether one person follows it or a billion do. Throughout history, this has been proven time and time again. The prophet Noah, peace be upon him, preached to his people for over 900 years. He delivered the message of Tawheed, pure monotheism, but only a small number of people accepted it. Most turned away, mocked him, and refused to believe, but that didn't make his message false. The few that followed him were saved, while the majority were drowned in the flood. So was the truth with the crowd, or with the man standing alone in obedience to his Lord. Similarly, Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, stood against an entire nation. He broke the idols that his people worshipped, challenged the beliefs of the majority, and was even thrown into a fire for his stance. But he was the one upon truth. And even though he was one man, Allah called him a whole nation in himself. That's the weight of standing on truth even when you're alone. In the early days of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his followers were a small, persecuted group in Mecca. The Quraysh were powerful, wealthy, and numerous. They controlled the city, the economy, and the narrative, but they were on falsehood. And though the Muslims were few in number, they carried the light of truth. Eventually, that truth spread across the Arabian Peninsula and beyond, not because of numbers, but because of the power of sincerity, sacrifice, and divine guidance. This same principle applies today. Islam may not be the largest religion in numbers right now, but that does not discredit its truth. In fact, Islam continues to grow, not because of force or popularity, but because people recognize the clarity and purity of its message. They find peace in its teachings, strength in its discipline, and meaning in its submission to the Creator. Numbers fluctuate, trends change, but the truth remains. So when someone says, if Islam is true, why aren't more people Muslim? Understand that truth was never a popularity contest. It was always a test of the heart. It was always about who listens, who reflects, and who submits. Truth isn't measured in crowds, it's measured in conviction. Because in the end, it won't matter how many people followed the truth. It will only matter whether you did. When we look into the lives of the prophets, a pattern becomes clear. Those chosen by Allah to carry the message were often standing alone, or supported by only a few. They weren't backed by empires or embraced by the majority. In fact, more often than not, they were rejected, mocked, attacked, and left isolated by the people they were sent to guide. This reality reminds us of something profound. The truth has never been about how many people follow it. If that were the case, the prophets wouldn't have faced opposition. But they did, and that's because truth challenges comfort, breaks illusions, and demands submission. And not everyone is ready for that. Prophet Nuh, peace be upon him, preached for over 9 centuries. He called his people day and night, in public and in private. He tried everything with patience and dedication, but in the end, only a few believed in his message. Imagine that 950 years of dawah and just a small group responded, yet Allah honored him, Allah saved him and those who believed and destroyed those who rejected the truth. That alone shows us that the success of a message is not in numbers, but in obedience to Allah. Then there's Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him. He stood up in a society that worshipped idols, stars, the sun, and the moon. He questioned their beliefs, challenged their logic, and called them to worship the one true God. Did they follow him? No. They rejected him, insulted him, tried to kill him, but still he remained firm. He didn't care about how many people were on his side. His focus was on the truth, and what did Allah say about him? Indeed, Ibrahim was a nation unto himself. One man alone, holding onto the truth, was worth more than a crowd upon falsehood. Prophet Musa, peace be upon him, was sent to one of the most powerful rulers in history, Pharaoh. He had magic, wealth, armies, and the loyalty of his people. But all of that didn't make him right. Musa stood against him along with his brother Harun. Pharaoh's people were the majority, but their arrogance blinded them. In the end, it was the believers who were saved and the arrogant drowned. The truth was never with Pharaoh's numbers. It was with the courage and faith of those few who followed the message of Allah. Even the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, began his mission in solitude. For the first few years he preached in secret. Then he faced boycotts, torture, and exile. Many of the powerful elite in Mecca rejected him. He didn't win them over with numbers or popularity. He won hearts with sincerity, consistency, and truth. Slowly, one by one, people accepted Islam. And those early Muslims were the foundation of something that would eventually reach every corner of the earth. Not because they were many, but because they were true. The pattern is clear. Majority never guaranteed truth, and minority never denied it. In fact, the opposite is often true. Allah tells us in the Quran that most people do not believe, most people do not reflect, and most people are not grateful. The prophets, with all their wisdom and connection to the divine, were often standing in opposition to the masses. Yet their legacy remains, and the crowds that mocked them, they're gone, forgotten. So when you see a truth standing alone, or a believer walking against the crowd, remember the legacy of the prophets. Remember that numbers can mislead, but sincerity never does. Because in the eyes of Allah, it was never about how many stood with you. It was about whether you stood with him. In a world driven by numbers, it's easy to think that the larger the group, the greater the strength. More followers must mean more success. More people must mean more truth, but the reality is far deeper. In the sight of Allah, it's not about how many follow the truth. It's about who follows it with sincerity, with sacrifice, and with the heart fully submitted. The quality of faith outweighs the quantity, always has, always will. We can look back to the early days of Islam to understand this more clearly. The first Muslims were not many. They were a small group facing enormous pressure from the leaders of Quraysh. But these few were strong in their belief, solid in their character, and unshakable in their commitment. Among them were giants like Abu Bakr, Khadijah, Bilal, Sumayya, and Ali. May Allah be pleased with them all. These weren't just names, these were people who stood firm while being tortured, humiliated, and isolated, and they never turned back. That's quality, that's real faith. Allah does not look at how many people line up in the rows of prayer if their hearts are empty. He doesn't count the number of people who wear the label of Muslim if they don't live by the truth. What matters to him is the sincerity, the taqwa, the love, the patience, and the striving for righteousness that lives in the heart. One sincere believer who wakes up before dawn to bow in prayer, who avoids sin even when no one's watching, who gives quietly for the sake of Allah. Much, a person is more beloved to Allah than 1,000 who only appear religious on the surface. Even the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that there will come a time when the Muslim Ummah will be many in number, but like the foam on the sea, light, weightless, easily moved by the winds. That's not something to celebrate, it's a warning, because numbers can deceive. You can fill a room with people, but if none of them stand for justice, mercy, and obedience to Allah, then that room holds no value in the scale of truth. The Quran reminds us over and over again that most people are heedless. Most people don't reflect. Most people don't believe, and yet, that's not the concern of the believer. The concern is to be among the few who do. The ones whose hearts are alive with the remembrance of Allah. The ones who follow the truth even when it's unpopular, even when it's lonely, even when it costs them something in this world. These are the people who carry the weight of this deen forward. These are the ones who make a difference, not by shouting louder, but by living better. When the angels record our deeds, they don't write down how many followers we had, how many likes we received, or how popular we were in the eyes of people. They record the truth of our intentions, the sincerity of our prayers, the honesty in our business, the patience in our trials. That is quality, and that is what Allah values. So if you're walking this path of Islam and you feel alone, don't worry about the crowd. Don't be discouraged by the numbers. Instead, focus on your own heart. Make your faith deep, strong, and sincere. Because in the end, one believer with pure faith is more powerful than 1,000 who only carry the name. And when the scales are lifted on the day of judgment, it won't be the numbers that save you, it'll be the weight of your faith. Islam is not a religion of convenience. It doesn't come to please the ego or fit into personal comfort zones. It calls for transformation, for a deep internal shift that demands submission, not just with the tongue, but with the heart, the limbs, and the soul. Islam requires sincere submission, not popularity, and because of that, it has never been about how many claim the label, but how many live by it. There are over 1 billion Muslims in the world today, but how many truly submit to Allah in every moment? How many guard their prayers? How many purify their earnings? How many turn away from what Allah has forbidden even when no one's watching? It's easy to say I'm Muslim, but the real weight of that statement comes with accountability. Submission means putting Allah first, before your desires, before your culture, before your opinions, and before the crowd. In the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, many people said the Shahada, but not all of them were sincere. Some embraced Islam for political alliances, some for social protection, and others just to blend in. But Allah knew what was in their hearts, and that's what matters most. Because the essence of Islam is not in saying, I believe. It's in living like you believe. The journey of a sincere Muslim is not always popular. It means standing out when everyone else follows the trends. It means choosing modesty when the world pushes immodesty. It means being honest in business when cheating might bring more profit. It means forgiving when revenge is easier. It means praying Fajr when sleep is sweet. These are not acts of convenience. These are acts of submission. Islam doesn't compromise its truth to attract more followers. It doesn't dilute its message to win a popularity contest. It stands firm, calling to the same principles it did over 1,400 years ago: Tawheed, prayer, patience, charity, justice, and accountability. And that's why those who truly follow Islam are often few. Because real submission costs you something, it strips away the illusions of control and reminds you that you are a servant of the Most High. Look at the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. They didn't become who they were by following what was popular. They became leaders of the world because they submitted fully, even when it meant losing everything. Bilal was tortured for saying Ahadun Ahad. Khobab had hot iron pressed against his back. Sumayya was killed for refusing to deny her faith. These were not people looking for popularity. They were people living for truth. Today, the world may offer you shortcuts. It may tell you that you can have Islam without sacrifice, without struggle, without submission. But that's not the path of the prophets. That's not the way of those who were truly guided. Islam is beautiful, but it's also powerful, and that power comes through surrender. Popularity can be bought. Trends come and go. Crowds shift and applause fades. But submission, real submission to Allah, that leaves a mark on the soul that never disappears. It shapes you, it elevates you, and it brings you closer to your purpose. So if the world doesn't understand your faith, if your path feels lonely, if your choices don't match the crowd, don't let that shake you, because Allah sees you, and He never asked for you to be popular. He asked for you to be true, and in the end, it's not how many people know your name that matters. It's whether Allah calls you one of His. Islam is not the largest religion in the world today, but it is the fastest growing. And that alone tells us something powerful. Truth doesn't need to dominate in numbers to move hearts. It spreads not by force, not by trending topics, but by the undeniable pull of sincerity, clarity, and divine connection. The fastest growing religion is not always the largest, because growth in truth isn't about popularity, it's about impact, it's about reaching the soul. People all over the world are embracing Islam every single day. From cities to villages, from universities to prisons, from celebrities to everyday people. And many of them didn't grow up in Muslim families. They weren't raised hearing the call to prayer. They didn't have the Quran in their homes. But when they encountered Islam, really encountered it, they recognized it. They saw the simplicity of Tawheed, the discipline of prayer, the mercy in zakat, and the wisdom in fasting, and something inside them clicked. Because truth speaks to the heart, not just the intellect. Islam doesn't offer a path of indulgence. It doesn't promise worldly ease. In fact, it calls people to a life of responsibility, patience, and constant self-reflection. Yet still, people are choosing it. Not because it gives them fame, but because it gives them peace, and peace is priceless. You can't manufacture it, and you can't fake it. When someone finds real peace through submission to Allah, they hold on to it, even if the entire world stands against them. That's the miracle. Despite the stereotypes, the misinformation, the media bias, and the hostility in some parts of the world, Islam keeps growing. Why? Because Allah is the one guiding hearts. No amount of hate can block what He wills to spread. And when someone sincerely seeks the truth, Allah promises to guide them. That's not dependent on numbers. That's dependent on divine wisdom. Even in the West, where Muslims are often misunderstood, more and more people are turning to Islam. And they're not doing it for social approval. In many cases, it brings them criticism from family, loss of friends, or even rejection by society. But they still choose Islam. That's not a trend. That's transformation. That's faith built on conviction, not convenience. And while Islam may not be the majority religion today, that has no bearing on its truth. If anything, its steady growth is a reminder that Allah's plan unfolds in perfect timing. In the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Islam started with just one man in a cave. No armies, no media, no numbers. But within a few decades, that message had reached the hearts of millions. Not by the power of numbers, but by the power of sincerity. Even now, it's not mass conversions that make Islam powerful. It's the depth of the individuals who embrace it. It's the way they change, the way they purify their character, the way they walk into submission with love and commitment. That kind of growth is more meaningful than any demographic chart. So while the world may keep counting heads, Islam continues touching hearts. It keeps planting seeds in places no one expects, and one by one, those hearts awaken. That's the kind of growth that lasts, not surface-level acceptance, but deep-rooted faith. Because in the end, it's not about how many are standing in the line, it's about how many are standing for the truth. In a world filled with noise, distractions, and countless voices claiming to hold the truth, there's one thing that remains constant: divine guidance. It doesn't shout. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't follow trends or demand headlines. It reaches hearts quietly, deeply, directly. Divine guidance reaches hearts, not headlines, because it's not meant to entertain the masses, it's meant to awaken the soul. When Allah guides someone, it's not because of a trending video or a viral debate. It's not because of what's popular on TV or who's leading the polls. It's because that heart was ready, that soul was searching. That person, in a quiet moment when no one else was watching, asked for truth. And Allah answered, that's how guidance works. It's intimate, it's personal, it's divine. The Quran tells us, indeed, you do not guide whom you like, but Allah guides whom He wills. 28:56. Even the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, could not guide his own uncle Abu Talib. The man who protected him, supported him, and loved him deeply never accepted Islam. And yet, people from distant lands who had never even seen the Prophet heard the message and embraced it. Because guidance isn't about who's around you or what's in the media. It's about what's happening in your heart. This is why you'll see people finding Islam in the most unexpected ways. A young woman reading the Quran in a library. A man in prison hearing a verse recited on a radio. A traveler visiting a Muslim country and being moved by the adhan. And suddenly, something changes, a light turns on, a heart opens, not because the world told them to believe, but because Allah chose that moment to guide them. That kind of transformation doesn't make headlines, but it changes lives. And in today's world, where everything is about being seen, being followed, and being liked, guidance still happens in silence. While the world watches the latest scandal or follows the loudest voice, somewhere a person is bowing their head for the first time in sujud. Somewhere a person is crying over a verse of the Quran they just read. Somewhere a heart is returning to its creator without needing applause or attention. That's divine guidance. We often measure success by visibility. How many people saw it, how many shared it, how big the platform is. But Allah's plan doesn't operate on public metrics. It works in the unseen. It works in the quiet corners of the world, in the quiet moments of a person's life. And when Allah guides someone, that guidance is stronger than any worldly influence. Islam is growing, but not always in the headlines. It's growing in the hearts of people who used to live without purpose. It's growing in the minds of those who used to question everything. It's growing in the souls of those who were lost and are now found. Not because it was trending, but because it was true. And while the world celebrates fame, power, and numbers, the believers celebrate hidayah, guidance, because that is the real victory, that is the real treasure. And it cannot be bought, forced, or manufactured. It is gifted by the one who knows what's in every heart. So don't worry if the truth isn't always in the spotlight. Don't be discouraged if the headlines never speak for your faith. Because Allah's message was never about being loud. It was always about being real. And in the end, it's not the news that will shape your destiny. It's whether your heart answered when Allah called.